Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing all right. A little hot here in New York City. How about yourself?
Also a little bit sauna-like, but we're going to bring some cool West Coast air into the podcast. So joining us from Kelvin Education, based in Orange County, is Baxter, Mante, and Zachary, Rankin. So Baxter and Zachary, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
All right. So you guys are engineers, and you found your way to education. And can you just tell us a little bit about how engineers from Orange County find their way into trying to revolutionize the way we handle social emotional learning in schools?
Yeah, I'll go first. This is Baxter. So it's totally by accident, for me at least. I guess my whole path started in seventh grade. I grew up in San Bernardino. It's just a small town in Southern California, and I took an introduction to HTML class in my middle school. I think I was in seventh grade, and for me that was my real kickstart into loving how technology works. It was the first time I could kind of apply something I had just learned to make a real world change. It was really impressive to me that I could type these letters and then suddenly my computer screen would turn red and there would be an image in the middle of the screen. So that was really powerful. From there, though, I never considered it a career. I kind of took all different routes. I graduated high school at 16, messed around in junior college for a while, eventually joined the Army. And then I linked up with Zachary, and he was already in the educational technology game. And then I just joined them as a customer support engineer. And it really took off from there. For me, the work was really fulfilling, really challenging, and to me, that's what really matters in my work. So, by accident.
Well, when you say instructional technology, obviously there's a huge range of products there, and software and applications and hardware. So where along the continuum of instructional technology were you guys at that time?
Yeah, Zachary, he goes all the way back to data director. So he's, since he was 16, been working in ed tech. Back then, he was working mainly in assessment. And then back in 2009, he was on the founding team of Illuminate Education. And Illuminate, they consider themselves like an educational insight platform. And so really, they handle anything that would be considered like tangible data. So attendance, behavior, gradebook, assessment scores, anything like that. And so really the spectrum was quite broad at our last gig. We were doing, anything you could think of: parent portals, parent messaging, all of that kind of stuff. And so when we started Kelvin, it was reimagining what we could do with our technical experience.
What made you guys pinpoint social and emotional learning, which of course I was incredibly drawn to because there's a lot of, with all the testing, mandates that seem to be maybe lessening. I think we've ignored social and emotional well-being tremendously.
Yeah, and I think we found the same thing. So, when we decided to get back together, we had all left Illuminate maybe 2 years ago. And this past summer, Zach gave me a call, and our other co-founder, Matt Light, and we decided, hey, let's, start working together. And we had a lot of conversations at that time about, what could we work on? And we were, quite frankly, we were pretty stuck on what we wanted to do because Illuminate did it all, and nothing really seemed interesting. And then we started to reflect on our own experiences as kids. So for me, I had a bunch of trauma and adverse childhood experiences that made it really difficult for me to thrive in school. And so I ended up leaving high school at 16. I graduated by taking the California High School Proficiency Exit Exam, I think it's called, the CHESP. And so for me, it was like all this stuff swirling around at home. I had a single mom who had some mental health issues. And then high school kind of hit ahead. I actually was in a SART meeting my sophomore year. So I don't know if you have SART meetings out in New York, but in California, it's basically when you're chronically absent, the school district gets involved with, I think, the police department or something. It's pretty intense. And
we have our own version of that here. Similar idea. I don't know if yours involves like social workers or if the court mandates become part of the equation.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I mean it was really official. Like it was at the police department in Redlands, a small town where I actually was going to school, and so at that point it kind of reached a head for me, and that's when we explored other options to get me out before it was too late. And so that was my experience. Our other co-founder, and I'll let Zach tell his story, but our other co-founder Matt Light, he was bullied really badly in school, and so he was one of those kids during breaks and lunches who would hide out in the teachers' classrooms or just try and sort of avoid the conflict.
Hmm.
And so when we started having conversations about how we could leverage our technical experience to help kids, which is what we wanted to do, it really started to center around this idea of like reaching students, giving them a voice and a way to reach out for help. And that started to segue into social emotional learning, culture climate, restorative practices, and sort of what we refer to as all the intangible stuff that often complements and influences the tangible stuff. And so, I mean, I agree completely that for a long time, social emotional learning hasn't been as much of a focus. And for us, at least in our personal experience and the research we've done, it has a huge impact on student success in the classroom and later in life. So that's my story and Leitster's story, or Matt, that's our other co-founder. We call
Hmm.
him Leitster. And then Zach, you can tell your story.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I actually went to 7 different
Oh
schools,
my
and
God.
then, like Baxter, I left high school when I was 16. Um, and for me, I was always that kid. I was really quiet. I did really well. I took AP classes and things like that. I got really good grades. But because I went to so many different schools, I never had a connection or a relationship with any of the adults at any of the schools. And so, I think that's pretty much what caused me to leave when I was young. So when we started Kelvin and we started doing research and talking to all of our friends and, showing that these relationships make such a big difference on kids' lives, like that just hit me. I'm like, yes, like I was that kid, if there would have been an adult that I could have connected to, maybe I would have been happier, been a little bit more outgoing, things like that. So,
What's interesting, what both of you are hitting on with your personal stories, and thank you for sharing them. What you're really sharing is kind of at the heart of what the instructional technology movement is all about. We have been saying for a while now that there are young people who can't necessarily or don't necessarily want to produce the types of things that they're being asked to produce in school, but yet they're incredibly capable, incredibly creative, incredibly innovative, and have the capacity to do, like in your case, world changing type things. But yet that's not reflected in the English essay that you might have to write or the science test you might have to take. And so here, the three of you found technology as your ticket out of that. For some students, it's the arts. For some students, it's science and math and technology. And of course, there are other outlets as well. But the pendulum is definitely starting to swing in that direction. And you see a lot of these stories over and over again. I mean, even taking some of the most successful people in the world, like, the Bill Gateses and the Mark Zuckerbergs, who drop out of school and basically reinvent how people communicate and how they do work and how they interact electronically and digitally and so on. So, I mean, there's so much human capital that goes untapped. And so it sounds like you're taking your personal experiences and trying to kind of open up opportunities so that doesn't happen to other kids moving forward. That's a laudable, very laudable thing. But I still come back to the idea, like, here you are, you didn't complete, you finished high school in a sort of a non-traditional manner. You're working for, a technology company. Granted, it was educational technology, but, how do you know about social emotional learning? You didn't sit through, like Nick and I had to sit through however many credits of, all these different kinds of courses and reading all the different theories. And so how do you just gravitate towards something that's so how do you gravitate towards something that's so important and yet so entrenched in what educators do on a day-to-day basis when that's not necessarily your world, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're extremely fortunate that throughout, our short careers so far, we've been connected to some really amazing, passionate, innovative educators, and we've been able to really connect with them and whether they're teachers who have been in the classroom, former school administrators, or even district administrators. At this point, we have a pretty good network. And so once we started to kind of settle on this idea of like, okay, let's give a way for students to have voice, to participate in their learning, to create counter narratives, and to engage and create those caring like adult relationships. We started kind of floating that idea around our network. So, chief research scientists, school counselors, school principals, assistant superintendents, all these different roles we talked to. And the more we talked to them, the more we realized that relationships were huge. And not only that, but culture, climate, and social emotional learning was huge. And so we started to look into the research. So, Castle has been a great resource. The core districts in California have been a great resource, pointing us to the research that really quantifies the impact that social emotional learning has, summarizing the latest developments in the research as well. So there's like a big initiative right now to crosswalk all of these different frameworks with different constructs to kind of create one framework, or at least have them related. And so we've just been really tapping into that network and these different organizations that have been providing some really tremendous thought leadership in the area. And that's kind of how we've been piecing it together. Meanwhile, like whenever we talk to our districts, like we're always very open to being like, hey, we're three guys who are great at tech and we're trying to do a good thing, but if we're on the right path, give us good feedback. And more importantly, if there's something more we could be doing or adjusting the system or the way we're thinking about approaching this work, like let us know. So it's definitely been collaborative and just learning.
Yeah, definitely learning on the go for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of learning. It's funny too, because we've been in the assessment world, being at Illuminate for so long as well, that, we see a lot of similarities between assessments and standards, and, similar, we have, the social emotional learning constructs that are kind of like academic standards. So there are some similarities between the two as well that I think has been, like our background in assessment has been pretty helpful with that.
Do you want to go into specifically like how the program works and how school districts utilize it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's very basic in principle. So the idea is, surveys have been around for a long time, but historically surveys are tough to give. They kind of take a lot of management and it's hard to get that voice. So what we've done is we've built a Chrome extension that is installed on students' devices. And then whenever they're browsing on their device, whether it's they're writing an assessment, they're on Khan Academy, they're watching videos on YouTube, the school admins or the district admins will actually schedule what we call a pulse. And it's just a check-in, pops up on the student's device. It says, something like, "Hi, Baxter, your school wants to hear about you. Your answers are confidential, so please answer honestly." They hit the arrow and they just start responding. And at that point, that's where they engage with the survey, and it's short and it's research-based. So all of these questions are, validated and reliable. They're not just, questions we've made up. We use emojis as well on Likert question types so that students can have sort of a visual cue that's familiar to them so they can respond. And then, they take, 5 or 6 questions is usually the pulse length, try and keep them really short and formative. And then at the end of the pulse, depending on how they've answered, and this can be configured by our clients, but you can actually prompt a student to request help. So we'll actually say, hey, it seems like you're struggling. Would you like somebody to come talk to you? And then we also have another question that's a little bit more open-ended, and it's, what's one thing you wish your teacher knew about you? And
that's a great question.
Yeah, and that's definitely not our question. So that's, I think Kylie Schwartz is her name. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but
I think that's right.
Yeah, she did amazing work, pioneering that question. And I can say firsthand that the districts that have been using that question, the answers students have been providing are so thoughtful and courageous and honest. It's been really cool. And then, the student takes it, it's done, and then it's basically they just keep going about their work until the next time it's time to answer a pulse. And then, the pulses can be configured and customized. So that's kind of how it works in general.
Which one of you has the background in quantitative research methods?
Neither of us. So, I mean, as hobbies. No, I didn't get that by 10th grade. So In college, I got a little bit of stats, of course, but this is where we really leverage our network. So we have good relationships with like there's a chief research scientist, former chief research scientist of Illuminate that we work pretty closely with, and he's been invaluable in telling us sort of how surveys are designed, how questions are designed, how to quantify that information, how to display it in a way that's helpful and still valid and not misleading. And then we also have a good friend who, he's a data scientist, from UC Berkeley, and so he's been really, really helpful too. So
The districts that you work with, what positions are usually the liaisons for your program?
yeah, it's a great question too, and we've just been figuring this out. We work a lot with student services folks are usually pretty receptive. Same with school counselors tend to gravitate towards it. District leadership as well, so superintendents, assistant soups, principals as well. So it's been good. I would say student services, if I had to pick one, would be the most prevalent sort of, I guess, persona or person type that we deal with the most.
And is it a program that individual teachers could purchase as well if they wanted to, just for their own classes?
Yeah.
Or is it just for districts?
So right now, theoretically, it could work for a teacher. We have never sold to a teacher or had a teacher individually use it, but we do have individual schools and districts is kind of how it's tended to be so far.
Okay. Has it been more, the people that have purchased it from you, more elementary schools or more high schools, or combination?
It's a combination. So, yeah, like for example, like one of our districts that we're going to be implementing in the fall, they're a pretty big district here in California, and it's a combination of elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. So it's sort of the gamut. But in terms of like, we kind of have a floor in terms of the survey's appropriateness for younger students, and we usually cut it off at about third grade. Below that, we're trying to work on some ways for pre-K through third grade to capture their data, but asking students, how do you feel about the experience at your school as in first grade can be unreliable.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. So you put out these pulse surveys, and then you generate what you guys call a heat map. So can you tell us a little bit more about what the heat map is and how that's utilized by the educators involved?
Yeah, great question too. So, for us, we're three white dudes from California, and so when we talk about our hard experiences, it's always with that kind of knowledge that we've also had some clear advantages too. And so, for us, it's really important to make sure that all students' voice are captured, and those differences in your significant subgroups can also be captured. And so what the heat map is designed to do is really do that. It's to highlight if there are different populations of your students, whether that's a particular program like GATE or special ed, a socioeconomic status, a race or ethnicity, or a gender or a grade level, or even a site that is doing, statistically different from the norm. So for example, you log in and you run your heat map, and you might see that across the board, the caring adult relationships is your weakest point at your school, but it's more significantly weak for your female English learner students for whatever reason. And so it's really to help you spot those outliers, those trends, and those issues, if that makes sense.
Sure, and then ask yourself, well, why are we getting the data that we're getting, and how do we address that?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just saying we're going to create an assembly for everybody, and you're just throwing like these, big responses at particular issues. Now you can sort of drill down and get more granular with who you're approaching with what particular problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about being targeted with your interventions so that they're as effective as possible, and you're reaching the right students with the right resources. Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys available to help us with our PhD dissertations? Because quantitative research methods are giving us fits.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys just naturally gravitate towards this.
Yeah, well, if you want, high school dropouts perspective on quantitative research methods, for sure. I mean,
we're soon to be PhD dropouts, so unless we get some
Yeah, I mean, we're like total geeks about this stuff. So if you ever want to just thought partner or like bounce ideas, or I mean, what we're really good at is the engineering side and like aggregating the data, disseminating it, visualizing it. We're pretty strong at all that stuff. Like Edward Tufte's work has been a big guidance in us in terms of our data visualization. So if you ever want to nerd out on that stuff, we're always game.
Yeah, well, you're gonna regret offering that. I assure you.
Do you have you ever like do you go to schools in person to speak about this product and about your own personal experiences?
Yeah, that's been the case more and more. What we found is, and we're kind of learning as we go, as Zach said. So we're not the most targeted, and especially because our past careers have never been in sales, so we're terrible at sales. We're really bad, like, but by all measures. But we're really good at caring about this work, trying to be thoughtful about the work, and so I think that's resonating with people, and so we've kind of seen this thing where we talk to one person and they're like, this is pretty cool, let me introduce you to my other friend who might be interested, and it's kind of created this little grassroots, for lack of a better word, thing. And then we end up, yeah, we go to schools and we talk to principals. Like I was just in the Portland area, and I met with a principal at a school, and she, we shared she shared her goals with me and some of the stuff we're working on. It was really cool. And yeah, we've been sharing our story pretty much everywhere we go. We try and set the context of why did we build these tools? Why do we care about this work? It's because of like our own personal experiences and our own story. It's very meaningful to us. So yeah, we definitely try and get out and share it as much as possible.
Yeah, and I would say we like really almost prefer it. It's so much different. Like when we worked at Illuminate, we noticed, we were one of like the teams we really like to get out there and talk to people. We used to have like what we called like regional meetings where districts around the same area would get together and kind of just learn from each other and connect and things like that. And so we used to love to go to those things, just, to talk to people, to see what other problems they're dealing with, to watch them actually use our application. And being developers, I felt like that was very important, just to watch somebody actually use what you built. And even when you saw them use it in a way that you didn't expect, and then we would take that information and be like, oh my gosh, there's a way better way that we could do this. Let's just update it. And then we get back to that person. We're like, hey, look at what we did based on what we saw you doing. And they're just like, oh my gosh, yes, that is amazing. I didn't think of that. Like, great. And so I really do think getting out and talking to people and seeing how they're using different software, our own software, has been like really, really important, and something that I think that more like ed tech people, especially like when it comes around to like the engineering side, should do more of, because I really do think it gives you a different perspective.
Yeah. Like, for example, we would go out to a teacher's classroom and you just see what a teacher deals with every day, or a school principal. They're teaching a curriculum. They've got 30, maybe more kids in the class. They've got a scope and sequence. They've got to take attendance. They have papers to grade. They're also a human being.
Right.
When you go there and you reflect on that and you empathize with that, you see how limited tech's sort of involvement in the classroom really is. And if you're respectful of that, you can make a difference. And so that's why we built it as a Chrome extension with automated scheduling and frequency without requiring students to log in. We email reports so teachers don't have to go looking for them. And that's all in an effort to sort of be respectful of teachers' time in the classroom, because we've actually been out there and seen it.
Yeah, I mean, you would be phenomenal keynote speakers at a major conference on education, because your own personal experiences alone and the success that you've had
That's right.
sends the message to educators that not only do we have to, look out for the well-being of our students, but look what can happen when those students do get out in the world. So, do you go to a lot of conferences? Do you try to?
It's funny you said that, because we were just at a conference 2 hours ago. So we're at
Okay.
yeah, we were at the California MTSS conference here in Long Beach, and yeah, it's just powerful to see. Like, it's always puts a lot of wind in our sails to see the passion, sort of the stuff that's coming out with educators. And it's funny you said that, because one of our clients is the assistant principal of the middle school that I first learned how to code, HTML. It was my introduction into technology. So I saw him at a conference, he walked by and I said, "Mr. Massey, oh my gosh, you were my assistant principal, seventh grade. I remember you." And he was like, "Oh, hey," and we got to talking. He was like, "What are you working on?" I showed him, and now it's kind of crazy and ironic, but I'm potentially, building software for his schools. And so it is really cool to get out there and to talk to him.
But that's the power of relationships, and that's the real, true, untapped potential in many schools and many classrooms, and that's what we have to, and that's what this software is attempting to do with this program. Is trying to create more and more of those experiences, more and more of those relationships, because that's what's going to win the day. We have tried, I'll get on my soapbox for a couple of seconds, but we've tried systemically to employ all kinds of tests, low stake tests, high stake tests, and we've tried all these other different methods. But at the end of the day, what really makes the difference is Mr. Massey connecting with you in a seventh grade class and changing the trajectory of your life. And that's what it's all about. So all the curriculum and the curriculum guides and the new math standards and the Common Core standards and everything else, all is secondary. And really the most important thing is what the kind of impact the adult has on the young people. And the adults are having impacts all the time. The problem is they're not always positive impacts. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they can turn a child off to something forever also. And so for every Mr. Massey who lights a fire for your coding talent, there's another teacher whose name you don't have to mention here publicly, but who turned off some other or snuffed out the fire for some other thing that you potentially could have done or been.
And I'll just interject, and I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Marc wrote a book about this whole topic that he just recently had published. So, and it's all nice. About just the role of technology. It's an excellent book. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I liked the tagline. Was it the lighting a fire for educators who are doing the work and burning down the stuff that isn't, or something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Educational pyromaniac.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. We were just checking it out.
But do you see a positive shift in the next 5 or 10 years in how we're using technology in the classroom, based on the people you've spoken to with your program?
I certainly think so. I think people are becoming more comfortable with technology, and also their expectations of technologies and the results and value that they bring, that expectation is becoming higher. And I think that's a great thing for education. And so, I think technology will continue to be better. I'm hopeful that it'll be better integrated as well. Right now, a lot of the ed tech platforms are quite siloed, and so there's all these disparate systems that don't talk to each other, and it's at the disservice of the students and the educators who we're ultimately supposed to be serving. And so, Zachary could talk all of our ears off more than me about it. He loves that stuff about, the fancy word is interoperability, but it's really about getting these systems to play nicely together so that ultimately we can give a better picture of the student and what they need. And so, I'm hopeful that it's going to go to good places, because I think educators are going to require ed tech companies to sort of move in a good direction.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's one of the things that's missing. We're finding these sort of singular solutions to different problems, but we're not finding something that pushes into everything else. So if a teacher may, grade something, and they're using a electronic grade book, but they can't push what they just graded into the electronic grade book, for example, or they're using like 3 different systems or 3 different things, or the kids are using different things, and it's just it's making it heavier when technology should be making it lighter and simpler. Yeah. Like what you're saying, as far as the heat map, for example, the kids are taking it, it's timed, it gets pushed directly to the teacher. It's moving at the speed of an educator, as opposed to asking the educator to stop the train to do a particular thing. And that, I could see this from my perspective as an administrator. Nick perhaps can agree with that as well from his perspective in the classroom, that one of the things that even the most forward-thinking, positive, risk-taking educator will find frustration in is when their day gets stopped, or their lesson gets stopped, or their momentum gets stopped because the technology has gotten in their way instead of being the wind at their backs.
Yeah.
So if you guys as engineers can figure out a solution to that, then you could basically just live in a house made of money
Yeah.
for the rest of your days.
We're trying. We have some cool ideas we've been kind of kicking around, but the idea, like, we always hold ourselves to the standard around, and I don't know who to attribute this quote to, but true transformative technology feels like magic. And it's that idea of like you were saying, it's supposed to be invisible and just produce a result, a value. When you open Google Maps, it magically gets you to your destination. You're not fiddling with it. You're not annoyed by it. It's not wasting your time. And so that's sort of the standard we're trying to hold ourselves to.
That's how I felt. I've always been a Mac person, and I always felt that way. And the frustration that I would feel when I'd go into the classroom and I'd want to, let's say, play a clip from a movie from my history class, and I'd put the disc into my Dell, and the Dell would say, "How do you want me to open it?" And I'm like, "I don't care how you open it.
Just open it."
When I give it to my Mac, the Mac doesn't ask me that question. It just opens it because it knows that when I put a disc in, there's only one thing that I want to have happen. Yeah. So, for me, that those were always the just kind of echoing what you just said, the areas of my frustration. And you do want it to be magic, and we want smart guys like you to go through all the blood, sweat, and tears, in your coding dens and programming dens while we are enjoying the fruits of your labor. That's the deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay because we love it. Yeah. We love it,
I love that word den, by the way. I've never heard it called a coding den, but it really captures the essence of like a little tiny coding room where guys and girls are just kind of jamming out on computers. So.
Well, it reminds me of a show Silicon Valley, which is one of my favorite shows. I don't know if you guys watch that or if it's too close to home.
We had
honestly,
to stop.
It hits way too close to home. Yeah. It's funny and sad.
Yeah.
Well, I won't ask who Dinesh is.
Or Urlacher, what is his name? It's a crazy one.
Thought he was the best.
Yeah.
But so just to kind of echo back to Nick's question, so where is this all going technologically in the next 5 or 10 years? Where do you see it all heading? In terms, I know you said interoperability, but what is a classroom going to look like in 5 years, 10 years? Is it going to be recognizable, or is it going to be completely transformed based on what's coming down the pipeline technologically?
Yeah, that's an awesome question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'll start with saying I don't know, because I always like admitting when I don't know something as much as possible, which is a lot. I would say that what I would like to see is, there's all these systems and these great, amazing, smart, passionate people working on these really important problems like academic performance, chronic absenteeism, behavior incidents, PBIS, you name it, MTSS. I think what makes all of that stuff really overwhelming for teachers in the classroom is what you hit on earlier, which is, it's just hard to use. It's heavy, I think you said. Mm-hmm. And when something's heavy, it's ultimately really fatiguing, and then you stop buying into the promise of what that thing can bring. And I think we're sort of in that space right now. I mean, anecdotally, I've talked to a lot of teachers and administrators and educators, and they're kind of like ed tech, it's expensive, it's heavy, it's not providing the value I was hoping it would get. And so where I want to see it is ultimately and this is what Zach and I are trying to get to, is could we stitch together all that stuff thoughtfully enough in a way, right now is data viz is the hot thing right now, is one of the hot topics. But go a step beyond that and really start providing insights and actionable things that educators can use in the moment, and start surfacing what in the engineering world we call unknown unknowns. So, if you were to look at me and Zachary as two examples, you would look at Zach and on paper he was an amazing student, but he was struggling and ultimately left. If you were to look at me on paper, it's quite the opposite. It's he's a terrible student and struggling, and he left. And so, if you can put together all those pieces of data from those disparate sources in a way that is digestible and actionable and evidence-based and easy to use in a classroom, I think it can be an amazing supplement to the teachers in the classroom. I always think of technology as supplemental to teachers. Like, how do we equip teachers and students and parents and all of the other educators with the right insights at the right time, in a way that's really thoughtful and easy and not heavy. So all that to say, I hope it's just a lot easier, a lot cleaner, and a lot more useful, I guess would be the way to encapsulate. I don't know. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, Baxter and I have talked about this a little bit too, but it seems so. I've been, doing this stuff with like businesses. So for like the last 15 years with like our multiple businesses that we've been a part of, and I've always seen that, education seems to be a little bit behind businesses, but then they kind of come around. So, businesses, and I talk more from like a tech side just because that's where I come from, like engineering, was a lot about, hard numbers, like how much code are you committing, how many commits are you doing, how many hours are you tracking, are you coming into the office? I remember when I started, it's like, if you're not in the office at 8 o'clock, like, oh, you're in trouble. You know what I mean? Like, my boss, Kent, he used to stand at the door and he'd be like, welcome to work. It is 8:03. welcome, and then, you talk 10 years later to where it's 11 in the afternoon and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, people are showing up to work now. Like, people have a flexible schedule. So like, it's changed so much. And, I think where before, like those hard metrics I were worried about, and then, now there's all kinds of programs talking about like employee engagement and culture, right? And so I kind of see the same thing in education where, it seems like they're kind of following like a similar suit, like, all right, we were all about this hard metrics and, timing and everybody needs to be at school at the same time and things like that. But like I could totally see it being like, all right, well, maybe certain things you have to be there for certain times and things like that. It's just, and then, the engagement and talking about this is why social emotional learning and school climate and culture becomes such a big thing now, is like, wow, this stuff actually matters. And when you think about it logically, it's like, yeah, like if I'm a happier person, like I don't know about anybody else, but I do much better at work. If I'm not fighting with the wife like the night before, like, I'm having like a great day the next day, or if we are fighting, like it's not such a good day. So, I think it's the same thing with students. And so for education, for me, I think that it is going in that right direction about, thinking more than just the metrics. It's, Baxter, I know you know this better, but it's
The whole child.
What are the, yeah, but no, for like in a business standpoint, when we talk about, what are like the needs of every single like employee, right? It's like you need mastery, right? You need to feel like you can master something. What were the other two?
Oh, autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Yeah. So I can totally see like education becoming more like that as well, where students can be more autonomous, they have the mastery, and then we're giving them purpose, like, why are you here? This is the context. Like, why are you actually in school, So, yeah, I kind of make the correlation between business, and it always seems to me like education kind of catching up to business,
I love that. I think you're dead on with that.
Yeah. Well, I think my last question would be, for all the Baxters and Zacharys that are sitting in classrooms right now, what advice would you give them?
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Because there are many if you're not aware.
Oh, I've seen the data. There's quite a few.
Well, I've seen their faces.
yeah, that's much more powerful. Huh. I mean, a couple things if I were talking to like myself back then would be, it's much easier if you participate in school and don't try and buck the system. Like, I think I was so disenfranchised, I was like almost trying to dismantle the whole thing. But it was like, hey, if you participate and engage, it's kind of like what you make out of it, right? Like you can make school a better experience for yourself by engaging, by being open to new experiences, by having a growth mindset, by challenging yourself, by setting goals. That'd be one. Yeah, that'd be one. And then another would be, I don't know. I'm going to think while Zach thinks of the other one. I think that's my big one. Keep going. Keep going. It gets better. and it all sort of makes sense in the end. Just kind of trust the process, really.
For me, I think that I would say that there are people out there who want to help you. I think that that's been one of the biggest things that I've noticed, especially being in the education world, is that like teachers got in this business because they want to help students. Principals got in this business because they want to help students. I think everybody in the education, doesn't matter, the janitors, the attendance clerks in the front, like all of them are in this business because they want to help students. And I think that, if I could have told myself, like, there are people that want to help you, like almost like let them help you, or, like share your story with them, I think is like, would have been really important to me. And that's part of why like Kelvin is so important to me, building those relationships, telling them your story. Everybody is connected. My sister actually told me this. I think she took it from somebody else, so I'm not sure where it came from. But
Oh, come on, give your sister some credit.
she said, yeah. But she says, everybody is connected by trauma. Like everybody's gone through or dealt with something. And so, not being afraid, I'm not saying you have to go in and tell everybody every single crazy detail, but just sharing your story with people, I think is something that even with Kelvin that we've been learning, is like really important. So yeah, that would probably be my thing.
Yeah, I want to go with that answer. I'm going to change my answer.
Wow. Well, I mean,
You gave me a second to think about it, Baxter.
Yeah, I know.
he took one for the team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a good answer.
Well, I have to say, I mean, you two guys are incredibly intelligent, and your hearts are in the right place. Your talents are in the right place. Working to help potentially millions of students across this country and maybe even beyond that. Have to commend both of you for the work that you're doing, the vision that you have, and your other partner who unfortunately wasn't able to join us here. But you really just thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your stories, and that's never an easy thing. And for the work that you continue to do, and we obviously wish you nothing but the best at Kelvin Education, and whatever we can do and whatever insight that we could offer you. We have about 50 years of experience combined, so that's certainly something hopefully you could tap into as well. So we're here to help.
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much. That means a ton to us. Like, if anything, we've learned along this entire process of trying to do this on our own and kind of follow our hearts is that there's just so many people out there willing to help and who care about this work, and it puts so much, I've said this a couple times, but wind in our sails. It really does. Like, keeps us going, in those dark coding dens when you're tired and you're hungry and you're like, what am I doing this for? It really helps push us forward. And thank you to you and all the other educators out there really who are doing like the hard work. Like Zach and I both have spent some time in classrooms. Like Zach volunteers in his daughter's, kindergarten class. I've tutored some third graders, 6 of them at a time. And it is exhausting, grueling, heart-filling work. So thank you for the stuff you're doing. And I will definitely take you up on that 50 years of experience because we can use all the help we can get, and we love feedback, both positive and otherwise. So
We try to avoid politics, but I will say if Marianne Williamson becomes president, I think you guys will be multi-millionaires.
Hopefully we can give some of that back to everybody too. So
Yeah, we can start with the two of us first, and then
yeah, definitely. Awesome.
But, again, thank you so much. Just a little closing here. If you'd like to follow us on Apple Podcasts, we're State of Ed Podcast. You could also find us on the web, stateofedpodcast.com, and you'll find some links to Baxter and to Zachary. We'll put their Kelvin Education link on there. Also, if you want to follow them on Twitter, you could follow them at Kelvin Education. You can also follow the podcast at SOE Podcast, or if you'd like to follow me specifically, it's at Marc Isix or marcisix.com. And please feel free to, Nick mentioned it before, if I do it, it's a shameless plug, but when he does it, it's fine. You can pick up a copy of my book, Forward Fast, Making Sense of Education in an Era of Rapid Change, and that's wherever books are sold. So again, thank you so much to Baxter and to Zachary for sharing their stories and for doing the great work that they're doing, and looking forward to all kinds of wonderful things that'll be coming out of their coding dens in the future.
Thanks so much, guys. It's been super fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Great
Best
questions.
of luck.
It was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you, guys.